Hi, everyone. I know you're all just coming in from the waiting room, but I just wanted to say hello. My name is Laura Rajkovic, and I am one of the initiators at Fall of Freedom. We're going to get started. Oh, hi, Francis. How nice. So nice to see people who are awesome. Great to see you all coming in. And I just wanted to not only take a moment to say hello, but also introduce you to Fall of Freedom for anyone who isn't familiar with what we're up to. It's an artist and maker-led initiative that was started last summer as a way to pull people together and build solidarity and resistance by actually doing what we do, which is making culture and making art. Our little tagline is art matters and courage is contagious, and we need to be not only sewn together by our creative wiles, but also in making things as forms of resistance themselves. So yes to petitions, yes to protests, yes to all of it, but also, and also, we make as a form of resisting the rising fascism that we see across this country and unfortunately in many other geographies around the world. And so Fall of Freedom is an open call for people to participate in that activation of culture as resistance by coming together on particular dates to actually plan our own resistances wherever we might be it large, be it small, be it, in a theater or a film or poetry or visual art. We all have a role to play in connecting folks with the art that we produce, and in doing so, we resist what we are up to. We resist this authoritarian regime that unfortunately we are all living under. So our next activation is on May 1st, on May Day, in solidarity with all the labor work that's going on, and also around immigrant rights work that's happening, particularly around immigrant labor. And we invite you to visit our website, which I will share here for a second so that you can check it out. Where are you? Oh, you know what? I'm going to have to show you my desktop for a second because I migrated away. Sorry. And here is the Fall of Freedom website. You can learn more about what we are doing on our About page. You can register an event, which is, if you were a part of it last fall, is much easier now. You can save a draft, you can go back to it and edit it if you decide to change the title or the address or all of that. So please uh, register your event. If you're doing an event that happens the day before May Day or the day after, register that event anyway. It's all part of the same vibe. Like, we're in it to win it, and we're in it together. You will find the registration up here. You'll also find it on the homepage. On the homepage, you'll also find other ways to participate. You can host readings, and I'll go through this later in the evening, but there are also events that you can participate in and register for down at the bottom of the landing page. So check it out. And now I am delighted to move to the main event of our program, which is, how do I stop sharing here? Sorry, stop. Did I stop sharing? Oh, here it is. Sorry. Sorry, all. Um, I just want to move to the main event tonight, which is to introduce the wonderful and very funny and very wise Anat Shenker-Osorio, who is the principal and founder of ASO Communications. She is a messaging guru. She has done so much work to kind of delve into the language and messages that both falter and deliver. And she's led enormously profound research that she shares via her website, OS, ASO Communications. All of the research that she does is open source, and so you can learn an enormous amount from browsing around her website and kind of downloading all of the pearls of wisdom that she has gleaned from the deep research she's done. She is the host of Words to Win By, which is a podcast and also a Substack by the same name. So check her out there and follow her. And I just wanted to say that I learned about Anat from her frequent appearances on Aran Giridharadas's the Inc. podcast and Substack. And I just found that she consistently brought like the most sane and cogent ways of thinking about what is going on around the globe, how we relate to it through a progressive lens. And I'm just delighted that she's here to talk to us tonight about how we can improve our own work. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Anat Shenker-Osorio. Anat, take it away.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to fire up my own screen share. And I'm going to take us on a bit of whirlwind tour on confronting authoritarianism. It's going to be speedy so that we can have time for Q&A. So hold on. So something I usually don't need to tell artists, but usually need to tell others is that rule number one of messaging per Bonnie Raitt is that you got to give them something to talk about. If you want to touch a nerve, you're going to have to touch a nerve. And if nobody hears your message, it is by definition not persuasive. A message that nobody hears cannot convince them. That should be obvious. But believe it or not, a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to find the most perfectly carefully calibrated 100 word, never going to offend anyone piece of milquetoast, which doesn't actually matter because nobody is going to notice that you said it or showed it or did it. And so I think of this as the Bonnie Raitt principle. One of the ways that we have seen this underway and in effect just before our own very eyes in this year of 2026 is the frame flip that we had to perform in Minnesota. I have worked proudly in Minnesota for almost 10 years and am just absolutely honored to have been able to be of any use at all to the folks who were doing the real work there, which of course is the on the ground organizing. And basically, at the outset of the 3,000 ICE agent surge that happened in that population, the metro area of the Twin Cities is 3 million, they came to me and they said, here's the frame flip we require. We need to move away from rabble-rousing protesters to versus law enforcement to something else. Because as long as we are living inside of the opposition's narrative, we are living in their lie and we cannot win. There are different ways to perform this frame flip. Before I come back to Minnesota, I will give you an example from Portland, where I used to live before I moved to the Bay Area, where I live now. When you are trying to counter a crime, it's a hellscape of crime, and you try to combat that with, actually, we've implemented common sense measures to abate crime, and what we've seen is that rates of crime have diminished, and over the longitudinal study of the that's back to my anti-Bonnie Raitt. Nobody heard a fucking word of that because you sound like the adults in the Charlie Brown cartoon. And by the way, you're still talking about crime. You're still having their conversation. And so, how do you counter a narrative that is so dominant? Well, an example from Portland, and it's not the only example, and it wouldn't work in every jurisdiction, is to actually use ridicule and to show, not tell, how absolutely absurd this regime is. As this photo depicts, how are they supposed to maintain this veneer that they are like the good guys enforcing the law against these like evil doing protesters when what you're looking at is an inflatable frog? Now, of course, this came about thanks to the extraordinary heroism of an individual who would come to the ICE facility in Southeast Portland every day in an inflatable costume, and that was his doing. But the organizers on site very wisely bought up all of the inflatable costumes they could find in the city and in the greater area. And if you go, even now, to protest at the ICE facility, there is a costume lending library. So you don't have to bring one yourself. You can just come put one on. It also has the additional benefit of being a protective measure. It covers your face, you can't be seen, and it gives you a little bit of insulation. And when it was cold, it was also a little bit warm. Inflatable frogs is not quite a Minnesota vibe. And so in Minnesota, there was a different strategy. And that was really to emphasize people of goodwill, people showing up with and for their neighbors, i.e., the golden rule versus the evil regime. And the way that this was accomplished, besides just the extraordinary amounts of actual neighborism that was going on, there, by most estimates, it's between 70 and 80% of the Twin Cities population was doing shifts, which is like out of any imagination in terms of people power. But it was when reporters were asking, hey, Anat, hook me up. I want to talk to somebody who's been in Whipple, who's been in detention and gotten out. What I would do and what others would do is say, I will hook you up, but here's the deal. You have to not just cover the harms and horrors, you have to cover the heroism. And so every evening, the volunteers who were doing rapid response, simplest thing on earth, we had a Dropbox. They would drop their iPhone content in there. We would go through it and be like, boring, dimly lit, poorly shot, too long, perfect video. And then through a network of content creators and many, many, many colleagues, we would supply that content to them to ensure that we could do what the mainstream media would not, which is depict not just all of the evil, which is important to do as well, but also what people are doing instead. Again, not just harms and horrors, but heroism. And so that sort of frame flip rests upon a set of principles that I like to call how to make believe, because it is making people believe in the sense of persuading them, but also in the sense of abating their cynicism, to make them believe that change is possible in the first place and that it's worth getting involved. So the first principle of how to make believe is say what you're for. And if you forget everything else that happens today and you can only do one thing, please have it be this one. All too often in progressive messaging, we are a no and a don't and a stop and a can't. We love ourselves some negation. Immigrants are not criminals. This is not going to take our jobs. Muslims are not terrorists. This is not a lie. Crime is not increasing. What we know from experimentation is that that is no different than Nixon getting on TV and saying, I'm not a crook. The only thing that tells you quite surely is that dude's a crook, and that's what sticks in your mind. When we expose people to negation and then we test them after the fact, what we find is that they recall the assertion, but they can't remember whether it was true or false, because basically what you've done is cement a cognitive connection between immigrant and criminal, as the example is in this case. And with all due respect to Elie Wiesel, no human is illegal is also a negation. All people have rights is what that means to say. Where this has left us is in a three narrative. There's basically three dominant narratives about immigrants running around in our country right now, and all three of them suck. I want to point out to you that all of the messaging on this slide comes from pro-immigrant advocacy. There is no opposition discourse on this slide. So the first narrative is that immigrants are villains. There is no evidence that immigration, and in particular, the recent influx of immigrants to Democratic run cities, is causing a crime wave. So, immigrants, Democratic cities, crime wave. Thank you. That's what I got. That they're victims. I call this the Ay Pobrecito story. This is done in an absolutely earnest and understandable effort to make people see, look how horrific everything is. And it absolutely is. I spend most of my time these days in immigrant rights. But what we find from this messaging is that while it can create sympathy, a feel sorry for those people, that is still a form of othering. Because if you are feeling sorry for those people, that is not you, and that is not empathy. So this is an example, refugees who've endured horror should be welcomed. And then the third narrative, because I'm a big alliteration girl, I call valets. This is my stand-in for doing jobs nobody wants, where we once again objectify immigrants and they're okay. We should tolerate them because, they look after our kids or they do healthcare or they mow our lawns or whatever, which is still another form of otherizing and also is just insulting, right? So we cannot actually win inside of these three stories, even as we are battling the unrelenting harms and horrors, which it's important to name and to name accurately. And I will get into that as well. We have to actually make a full-throated argument that immigrants are awesome. Because, by the way, we are. And because we have not had an argument in this country for at least 20 years that immigrants are awesome, and how horrifying is this? The last national leader who actually made this argument was Ronald Reagan. We have allowed the right to enter into this vacuum with everything that the right does, which is scapegoating and vilification. And so part of this saying what you're for is creating what's called in marketing an overlap of brand identity between whatever it is you're trying to persuade people of and your target audience. That means starting from the place, this is how empathy works, of what you share in common instead of starting from the place of what you don't share in common. So this is an example from work in Australia. I worked there a lot. I spent 2015 living there to deal with this very problem of the offshore prison camps that the country had been operating since 2001. So at that point, 15 years. In 2013, on the left, the messaging, classic negation, seeking asylum is not illegal. 2015, when I was living there, classic harms and horrors messaging, the only developed country in the world that locks up children. Happy to say Australia is not that, the US is. To where we shifted, not happy about the latter part. Oh my goodness, this is being recorded, and that line is going to be used against me forever. Not happy. Sorry, I just meant that Australia moved to where we moved in 2016, where you see here Amir, who is in a prison camp in this photo. I'm happy to tell you he is no longer in one. But he doesn't look like it, right? Saying, I want to be a human rights lawyer. There are people on this planet you can help by doing simple things. And the affirmative demand, bring them here. Not end this, not stop that, not don't do this, not we can't have that. I'm happy to tell you that the Australians won bring them here. They won kids off Nauru. They won the medevac bill. And they won let them stay, thereby vacating nearly all of the prison camps and shutting them down. There's a little asterisk there. There's still one that's like halfway operating. It's not a resolved issue, but a massive sea change in a policy that had operated through different left and right wing governments for 16 years. And that happened in 1 year, in 2016. Another example of this overlap of brand identity and building empathy is from work that we did in Minnesota. This is back in the launch of a 2018 midterm campaign. All of the horrors and the vilification of the Somali American community there, which is sort of ripe for this evil doing because it represents what I like to call the turducken of hatred, anti-Black, anti-Muslim, and anti-immigrant. So, of course, the right wing has fixated and focused in on this community in particular because there are so many avenues with which to spread these lies and this hate. And so rather than try to combat this with nothing, you cannot combat something with a nothing and say, Muslims are not terrorists, Islam is not this, we are not that, this is not what's going on. The community there threw a celebration called Eid is for Everyone with 20,000 people celebrating Eid al-Fitr in Viking Stadium, i.e. the Minnesota temple. And it was pony rides and it was carnival games and it was like, yeah, like you heard a thing, just come see it. Just come see it. Again and again, when we are confronted with the world's greatest horrors, it can feel like a not, how could there possibly be an affirmative message to make? And what I want to say is that if you dig deeply enough, you will find one.
You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. Tu me alegras si es así. You never know, dear, how much I love you. Nunca quitas mi cielo de mí.
The other night, dear, as I lay sleeping,
I dreamt I held you in my arms. Al despertarme no te tenía. Escondí mi cabeza y lloré. Please don't take my sunshine away.
This was from the first Trumpicene, a campaign that we ran in California. I'm happy to tell you about how it all turned out, but we met our goals, which was about getting rid of 5 Republican lawmakers in the state. So that's all say what you're for. The second principle is order matters. We find that the same 3 sentences tested in a different order gives us a different result. And we find that the best opening for messages is a shared value. There are lots of shared values. I want to focus in on freedom as a shared value, not coincidentally. Freedom is an extraordinarily important value to hang our hat on, because when we ask Americans, this is just one example from a 10,000 person survey we conducted. You can see this in public polling. You can see this in, our own polling. When we ask people in just a few words what values matter most to you as an American, freedom is number one. That is true across races. It's true across age groups. It's true across ideological categories. And the next closest is not close. Americans really feel that freedom is sort of integral to Americanness, regardless of whether it is actually accurately represented. And in fact, when folks tell me, but freedom is a right-wing thing, like that's their value, I understand that they have attempted to seize freedom so that you can have the right to worship their version of Jesus and have a gun, and that's about the size of it. But freedom has been integral to progressive victories across time. So, of course, the civil rights movement, Freedom Summer and Freedom Riders, free at last, thank God Almighty, I am free at last. Freedom to marry, which not at all coincidentally was deliberately selected as a move away from the right to marry. Freedom Riders. Freedom has been really important. FDR's 4 freedoms, with the economic promise inherent in there. In 2022, during the midterm elections in the battleground states, which we won, we ran a very big Protect Our Freedoms campaign. It was ads, it was messages, it was all sorts of things. And here you can see just a panoply of different kinds of candidates using freedom, including in some very fun, quirky ways, like Mary Peltola in Alaska running on fish, family, and freedom. Very Alaska. I don't think fish, family, freedom would sell everywhere, but does there. So after you name that opening value, instead of leading off with what I like to call, boy, have I got a problem for you, you then move second to a villain, to a source of the problem. Because if we do not name villains, we are the villain, or the groups scapegoated by the other side, which I will come back to, are the villains. And then we close with some desirable vision. So if you're counting, it's positive, negative, positive. That is the ordering. Here is an example of doing just that from an ad we made very recently. So rather than begin with ICE, we begin with that shared experience. Again, that overlap of brand identity, because it actually makes the villainy feel worse. The next principle is that politics isn't solitaire. Unfortunately, our audiences don't just hear from us. They hear the unrelenting fear-mongering and race baiting from the other side. There is nothing new under the sun. We have been dealing with this forever and ever and ever, right? It used to be called odious things like welfare queens, states' rights, forced busing, etc., and now is called things like illegals and, of course, trans panic. That narrative is made out of stoking, exacerbating, doubling down on racial fears and gender panic. And while the effect of this language, which by the way is also what Orban relied upon, is also what Bolsonaro is also behind Brexit, is also behind, the prison camps that Australia was operating, and this is how authoritarians authoritarian. They say, would you like to know why your life sucks? Would you like to know why you have more month in check? Would you like to know why you feel out of place? It's because of those people who don't come in the right way, those people who don't want to contribute, those people who don't believe in our way of life. And while the effect of that is that it creates enmity against the groups, its core purpose is actually to undermine any sense of a collective. The reason they do it is to make people not want universal health care, not want broad-based labor protections, not want robust arts funding, not want free or cheap public universities. Because we're meant to feel that there cannot be nice things because there is no us. There's a them. And that them takes away from hardworking people, apropos that I'm doing this on tax day, who are coded as white, and spends that money on profligate people who are coded as black and brown. That creates economic resentment and status threat. The cycle goes on and on. This is their shtick. It's always been their shtick. Fortunately, we have a counter to this shtick. It is something we have developed for a very long time. It was originally called the race-class narrative. It is now the race-class-gender narrative to weave in also how we contend with the gender panic elements of this. Again, it opens with a shared value, as I told you before, that explicitly names, or if you're doing video or images, shows whatever axis or axes of division the opposition is trafficking in. It names the villain second, and it specifically names how they exploit division across race and or lack of familiarity with trans folks in order to, it explains why they do it, to hold on to wealth and power. It emphasizes unity and collective action to achieve some sort of victory, and then it connects that victory to a vision. There's some sort of call to action that you're doing in there. Because I had raised Minnesota before, I'm going to go back to 2018, give you an example from there, see if you can tell when it goes from values to villain to vision.
In Minnesota, we know long winters, and we know how to dig our neighbors out of the snow. Because whether it's our first Minnesota winter or our 50th, we've all been there. So when certain politicians want to divide us and make us afraid, we know that means they've got nothing else to offer. We're on to them. There are lots of ways to be Minnesotan, and all of them are greater than fear. In Minnesota, we're better off together. Vote greater than fear between now and November 6th.
Greater than fear was our 2018 campaign. Next principle, if your words don't spread, they don't work. Coming back to Bonnie Raitt, in essence, a message nobody hears cannot convince them. So we need to remember that a message is like a baton that has to be passed from person to person to person. If it gets dropped anywhere along the way, it is by definition not persuasive. That is why, rather than believing the nonsense that, oh, you're just preaching to the choir, we need to remember that the choir is where the trouble starts. And if the choir will not sing the joyful noise, the congregation is not going to hear the music and go out and convert the conflicted. This is something the right wing has understood forever and ever and ever. It is why they have those odious red hats. It is because they know that it is the most faithful that actually do the work of moving the message and altering what counts as common sense. And the reason that this matters is because we've been fed a false story about the people in the middle. We have been told that they are moderates. They are middle of the road. They are centrist. In point of fact, the data do not support that conclusion. They are conflicted. I call them the good point people. Here's why. In a survey, you ask them, to what extent do you agree, disagree? Talking about race is essential and moves our country forward. 65% of them say yes. You ask them, in a survey, talking about race is divisive and moves our country backwards. 60 to 65% of them say yes, because this is them. Good point, but yeah, good point, but also good point. In point of fact, in 2024, in the exact same surveys, thank you, New York Times, where we would hear reported that the majority of Americans support mass deportation, which of course was never actually described to them, more Americans would support a pathway to citizenship asked of the same sample in the same survey. So what we need to understand is that the broad swath of people in this country, whatever they hear repeated most frequently is true and common sense and the way the world works. There's no other way to explain things like the rapidity of change in perception, for example, of ICE. It's moved, it depends on the survey, between 25 and 29 points in 9 months. And that is because they are witness to a different set of things. If their mind were made up, if they had a centrist position that was fixed, it wouldn't shift that rapidly. And then we need to recognize there is a third group of people who cannot, shall not, will never agree with us. Never, 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 never. And even if you say the most blandly inoffensive things and you calibrate your thing to not offend anyone, which by the way means your base isn't going to hear it, they're not going to take it up, they're not going to use it to convert the conflicted, you're still not going to get these people because they just disagree with you. And so what we need with these people is for them to be marginalized. If the opposition likes what you're saying, what are you saying? The final principle is that we're asking people to do things, or we should be asking people to do things. And so it's really important that they be the protagonists in the story. Right now, and for a while, we have been contending with epic amounts of cynicism and with a very understandable feeling that like we're thoroughly fucked. So I'm just going to watch the world end in high definition or check which episodes of Real Housewives are on for me. And so one of the most important things we have to do is actually break through that thing.
In today's news,
corporate price gouging.
New abortion ban.
Yes. Doom. That's all there is. Nothing can stop it. Doom!
We know things feel bleak right now. We can all feel
helpless. Useless. I will suck them into despair.
But buck the up.
Wait! I need the powerless!
Come on.
Thanks.
We decide what comes next. We have made history before, and we will do it again. Let's do this.
I want to turn our audience into agents because one of the most persuasive tools we have in our belt is social proof. Social proof is simply a psychological term that references the fact that people do the things they think people like them do. We are social creatures. We are primates, mammals. And so we look around in our environment and read unconscious cues to tell ourselves, what does a me kind of a person think? And so when people think and believe and see that a me kind of a person supports, let's say, mass deportations, or a me kind of a person wears the odious red MAGA hat, then they're like, okay, I guess that's what I think. Especially when they're not seeing anything on the other side. And so one of the most important things that we can and need to be doing is actually reminding ourselves and of each other that the future is simply made of the decisions that we take together, and that we have, in fact, overcome really, really difficult things in our past. This is from a collaboration with Broadway Cares and the musical Softs. Yeah. Guess
the path will be twisted and risky and slow, but keep marching, cause your ancestors are all the proof you need that progress is possible, not guaranteed. It will only be made if we keep marching on. Keep marching on.
So to leave off a little bit of what we're up to, we are helping with a broad immigrant rights campaign across 30 organizations that we call Brave of Us. We know from research that the number one impediment to public action is fear, not a shock. And so it's actually important to talk about bravery and courage, as Laura did at the outset. The tagline of our campaign is making this the land of the free. It's principally about making an affirmative immigrants are awesome story. And it also applies if you're not an immigrant. So it is brave of us to blow the ice whistle. It is brave of us to make art that contests for power and tells the truth. It's brave of us as journalists to report what's going on. It's brave of us as lawyers to pursue justice. Basically creating a pro-social identity, a desirable belonging for people who are in the resistance, not merely just in opposition to the regime. Brave of Us, we have these messaging guides. They're in 7 languages. Happy to share them. These are some examples of people using Brave of Us. We kicked off actually with an art installation in Art Basel in Miami, the early part of the year. Fabiano Rodriguez, who some of you will know, has made some lovely pieces thanks to NEA in this Brave of Us branding. I recently was in LA for a Brave of Us How to Ridicule a Ruler comedy show with Sashir Zameda, and Jane Fonda came and said a few words, and Jenny Yang and Reggie Watts and Aparna Natrala, and I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody and I feel terrible, Zainab Mohammed, and is just some merch. So that's a little bit of what we're up to.
Thank you so much, Anat. That was amazing. Crash course in doing it the right way. So I have one question for you that is that I've had pushback on, and that is using the word fascism to describe our current situation. And I just wondered, given all the research and discussion points you've made about is where do we put this kind of language where we're, because I feel like we need to name some of the stuff that's happening, and there is power in that. How do you think about using the word fascism?
Yes. So early-ish last year, I wrote an essay called Fascism in the English Language, after Orwell's Politics in the English Language. I have been part of having a toolkit called Freedom Over Fascism for 6 years. So how do I feel about calling it fascism? I feel that it's essential. I am going to say why, but I'm going to pile on to that. Regime, not administration or government. Administration and government is deeply, deeply normalizing. It keeps people trapped in the idea that what's going on is sort of your standard right-wing government, and maybe we disagree with it, but we're going to get out of this just by having an election. If it was going to be possible to vote our way to democracy, then we would have done it in 2020. It as essential and critical, and I work on elections, as voting is, the idea that that is sufficient to curb what's going on is actually deeply problematic and part of why we have not exited and we will not exit if we do not stop kidding ourselves. Concentration camps. We are operating concentration camps. They are not detention facilities. They are not detention centers. It is critical to remember the Nazis did not invent concentration camps. They inherited them from many different civilizations that had used them, including, of course, our very own United States. A concentration camp is legally defined as a place where civilians, as opposed to prisoners of war, are housed without due process. That is the legal definition of a concentration camp. Remind everybody, in case you don't know, Nazi Germany operated concentration camps from 1933 until 1939 before they became extermination camps. People are dying in these places, and we still possess the ability to use our language. I'm going to come back to fascism, I promise. We still have a window here. We are still in the window before total consolidation. We are in what political scientists call competitive authoritarianism. That's the technical name for what we are in. And if we are not telling the truth about what is going on, what will continue to happen is people will continue to believe that this is going to sort itself out, or we'll fix it with the midterms, or someone else is going to take care of it. We actually require sustained resistance. Like, we need way more fuck you happening than we have had happening. And we are not going to get the level of defiance that we require, which has been the only thing that has durably felled authoritarianism in any society where it has appeared, including this one, where, I mean, what was Jim Crow? What was enslavement other than fascism? We've been here before, if not, for the entirety of society. So I can't say enough how critical it is to call the thing what it is, because without doing that, we aren't going to marshal the level of pushback that we actually need. We're not doing anyone any favors by biting our tongue.
Yeah. And how do we convince institutions to do that as well as individuals?
Yeah. So, being a leader means to go first. That's literally what a leader does. And so the first thing is that you do it yourself. I mean, if you knew, like, I have to work in democratic politics, like, the hits that I have taken for what I have said we need to say. So first of all, you need to say it yourselves. You need to put it on art yourselves. I am desperate to do a close the concentration camps banner on, like, to take boats out on the Potomac and out in front of the Statue of Liberty and have a giant banner that says close the camps. Um, so you say it yourself, and then you give people like license. So for example, concrete, I told people at the beginning of the budget, which was introduced last March, I said, "Oh, we need to call this the MAGA murder bill because it is a MAGA murder bill." And if you call it the big ugly bill or the big ugly betrayal or whatever, you sound like a kid on the schoolyard being like, "I know you are, but what am I? I know you." Like, it's weak. And no one will hear it. Back to the Bonnie Raitt thing. Like, no one's going to notice you said that in the first place, which is mostly what happens with our leaders. Nobody notices what they say because what they say is so weak, like it doesn't even register. And in fact, the only thing that registered about that budget was when Joni Ernst, the crypt keeper, was like, some people are going to have to die. That's what actually broke through, which just is more to my point that this thing is a MAGA murder bill, and it always has been. They're killing people. They are a murder regime. That is what they are. So when I was saying this over and over and getting told that I'm, and I quote, hysterical, what one institution did, the Economic Policy Institute, wonderful people, is their chief economist went on TV and she said, some people are calling this the MAGA murder bill. And the fact is that people are going to die. We can even make you estimates of how many people will die. So, like, some people are calling it. That can be
Mhm.
people's, like, gateway drug.
Yes, yes, great. I have a question from Na Ang, and they say, why do you think progressives gravitate towards negation so intensely? And what can we do to persuade them to do it differently? I find it's impossible to edit all the negation in my colleagues' messages. It's like a force that takes hold of them.
Yeah, I like to joke that I could spend every minute of every day rewriting progressive websites out of passive voice, but also negation, and be fully employed for the rest of my life. So the reason is honestly because we don't know what we're for. And it's painful and it's hard. We begin all of our projects when somebody wants to work with us, we ask them, what do you wish people believed about whatever this issue is you want us to work on? And then when they're like, and they finally eke out an answer on what they wish people believed about taxes or about the child welfare system or about, we work on a lot of issues. Then we ask them, okay, let's pretend you did that. You made people believe that thing. What do you want them to do?
Hmm.
What are you asking of them? They basically can't answer because we have been living inside of our opposition's narrative forever. We don't even notice it. And anytime we try to step out of it, people tell us we're nuts, or people tell us we're exaggerating, or people, if it's a positive, tell us that we're being airy fairy and, like that's never going to happen. You're being ridiculous on the positive end, too. So, what I would say is that the reason why we are so prone to negation is because it's like the parable of the fish being like, what's water? Like people don't even notice that we live inside of the opposition's story. Let's think about the idea, for example, when we say, voters are turning against Trump's immigration policy. People are against, this immigration policy or immigration enforcement is out of control. What immigration enforcement? It's crimes against humanity. What immigration was being enforced in Minneapolis? Excuse me, immigration from where? Canada?
Yeah.
Immigration is basically down to zero. People are not immigrating here. Immigration policy is a term. It means rules governing how many people get a visa, what kind of visas are available, how long does it take to get a green card, how long does it take to become a citizen. And reasonable societies can have arguments and debates about immigration policy. We may disagree about immigration policy. What you cannot debate is abductions, crimes against humanity, and concentration camps. There's no reasonable debate to have about those things. But we say, like, Trump's immigration policy is terrible. Like, the immigration enforcement happening in Minneapolis was going too far. So, words mean things. And, like, we gotta stop. The fact, I'm sorry, I could go on and on, that we call the Save Act, it's been like, I've made this lecture 300 times. We called the Patriot Act the Patriot Act. We called Citizens United Citizens United. Whatever it is they name the thing, we just want an A on the vocab test. Like, we're like, I got the vocab right. I did it. Give me an A, teacher. It's the Voter Elimination Act. Save Act sounds good. So, yeah,
Thank
it's just
you. That's
because we
very
live in their
helpful.
story.
Yeah. I have another one from Nirvan Saraya. In an era of widespread misinformation and propaganda, what are the most effective strategies for one, building a fact-based information diet, and two, engaging constructively with people whose arguments rest on false premises?
So first I want to tell you that persuasion is fact neutral. So you can have a highly, highly, highly persuasive argument that has a million facts. You can have a highly persuasive argument that has zero facts. Facts will never make your argument for you. And the reason for that is because facts bounce off of frames. The the more accurate way of explaining how humans process information is I'll see it when I believe it, not the other way around. And that is why people are like, but I don't see sexism. It's not happening, but I don't see racism. It's because they're predisposed to be like, well, that cop was just a single asshole. That's just because, like, he did the wrong thing, or that dude, he's just being mean. Like, that's not a widespread, social conditioning thing. So, what I would say is that um, it all depends on your theory of change. And, if we were having a conversation instead of me like monologuing at you, I would say, well, what do you wish people believed? And I assume, based on what I can surmise from your question, that what you wish people believed is like that there is objective truth, that true things are true. It's not like a matter of opinion, and that we should want to seek out and like live inside of that and guide our information, guide our decisions accordingly, engage constructively with people whose arguments rest on false premises. So here's what I would say. I would say on the people who are living in false premises, it basically never ever works to be like, well, actually, you're based on a false premise, or like you have misinformation, because that just creates defensiveness. And then you're just like stuck now in a, is it false? Is it true? Is it false? Is it true? Is it false? Is it true? So really what you want to do, I mean, it's kind of media training 101 for those of you who've been through it. You need to have the things that you want to say, and it doesn't matter what the reporter asks you. And in this case, what the other person comes in with, you have the 3 points that you want to make, and you have to figure out how to keep coming back to your points and not get sucked in. And it's very hard by like, wow, this person has like, they're out here saying wacky things.
Stuff.
Like, you can't get vacuumed into that. So so let's pretend the person's like, vaccines cause autism, or like, I'm just picking that one. You say to them, I hear you. It makes total sense that you're worried about your health. You want to make sure that whatever care you are getting is the very best thing for yourself and your family. I feel the same way. And what I try to do, what I try to make sense of is, what are the things that people around the world and across time have done to protect themselves and keep themselves healthy? And I think one of the things that we've seen across space and time is that diseases that used to kill millions of our ancestors have been all but wiped out, at least for now. And then when I think about when I get nervous or I hear information, where is that coming from? And what is that person trying to do? Are they trying to scare me because they have something else to sell me? Like, you narrate the equivalent of the dog whistle. And then the one other thing, and I know I'm answering long, with people who are truly like in mis and disinformation, and if there's like a loved one or a person you care about and you really want to try, it's very hard. People live inside of conflicting desires, and people have a very strong desire to not be a sucker. That is a very strong human desire, is to not be taken in. And so a lot of the folks who specialize, for example, in cult deprogramming, what they will tell you is that the only hope in that situation is to kind of help them engage in a war between not wanting to be a sucker and the thing that they've been sucked into believing. And you say, not like, you're a sucker, you believe some bullshit, because again, that's just going to get defensive. You're going to say, yeah, wow, I hear that. That's a lot of really interesting information. I've known you for a long time. We've been friends a long time. And I think one of the things I've most admired about you is just how committed you are to really doing things your own and to figuring out what's right and what's wrong, and to not suffering fools. I know you're not the kind of person who wants to be taken in by some bullshit. So this is what's called presuppose, don't assert. You basically are like, I know what kind of person you are and I admire it. You're a person who doesn't let anyone trick you. And
Yeah.
then you go into like that. Yeah.
This is super helpful. Thank you for that. There's another question about from Julie Pepito, who says she's been designing and making art for the front of the past major marches in New York City, including Hands Off New York, No Kings, etc. And she wants to know about communicating positive messaging with people who are fixed in a no language and are used to questioning and are not used to questioning it. So she says, and also it has been hard to have the what are we for language in combination with anti-fascist language in 4 words or less on a sign. So she asks, what do you think of the message peace is power as a positive to no war? Like, how do we flip that?
Yeah. So what I would say as an overarching thing is free America. Free America from wages we can't live on and rent we can't afford. Free America from this regime of the bullies for the billionaires. Free America from these murderers who are abducting our neighbors, destroying our children, and bombing people overseas. Free America from the poison of, whatever. Like
Climate,
it can
yeah.
go on and on and on and on and on and on. You know, a lot to me, the parallel of what we're living under, because I really do think of this as a regime that is engaged in a hostile takeover of our government. I do not think of this as our government.
Yeah.
Our government are public school teachers and people at the NIH and people who pave our roads and people who do science research and people who, fill in a lot of blanks. There's a lot of people. And what this is a regime this is a regime of the bullies for the billionaires that has taken over our government. And so I really think of us as Nazi occupied France. And the Free France movement is really, really critical. And that's where Free America, that riff comes from. Um, yeah. So, I mean, obviously the opposite of no war is peace for all. But free America sort of lends itself to that being modular, like economic, voting,
It can
war.
touch on it touches on so many different issue areas that a lot of people can connect to it. Um, yeah, that's really great. And that I'm very sensitive to the fact that we are almost out of time. And I guess there's one other question that I'd like to pose, because in fact, you and I have talked about it, which is from Michelle Pred, who asks, isn't it interesting that follow freedom actually is a negative message? What do you think about that? And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, spoiler alert. Uh, I when Laura and I met, I mentioned that. I mean, I think it is challenging because it does suggest, I mean, I assume that it originated because the events began in the autumn, right?
Yes, we thought it was the fall of freedom in a positive sense, and also contending with it has a double meaning. So the fall of freedom in the fall also relates to the response to the fall of freedoms.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky one.
It is a tricky one. Especially when you're starting in May. Ah,
Well,
I guess
yeah,
it's the fall in the southern hemisphere. That's what you mean.
that's what we
Um,
mean.
uh, it does, on the one hand, one could argue that it is a naming of the problem. And I mean, I think what's challenging about it is that if the argument is that it is the naming of the problem, going back to the passive voice comment that I made quickly before, it's unsourced. It's as if freedom, like, I don't know, ate too much at
Oh,
Thanksgiving if
yeah.
we're going for a fall holiday. And so it just like got heavier and got additional gravity. And as opposed to what's actually happening, which is, there's a set of people who are taking away our freedoms, which
Yeah.
we all know, right? Um, yeah, I mean, I don't think you're gonna change it because like you're in it.
Yeah.
So I'm not
But
really sure.
but it's an interesting test case because it was something that we thought offered both, but in fact it has these other these other meanings. So yeah, thank you.
If
I
it's
want
any
to,
consolation, greater than fear, when we were doing greater than fear, I got that all the time. People like, aren't you just negating? And in some ways, yes, in some ways, no. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
I think we're stuck with Fall of Freedom for the time being until we reinvent ourselves under a new universe. Hopefully that doesn't include the fascists that we've been talking about all evening. Anat, I want to let you go because I know you have a strict end time, and to thank you profoundly for this enormously educating little webinar. We are so grateful that you were able to do it. And I would invite anyone who wants to stick around after Anat goes to talk a little bit more about how you can get involved with Fall of Freedom. I'm here to answer questions, and I'll be happy to navigate you through the website for a little bit. So let's all say thank you and good night to Anat, and then anyone else who wants to stick around, I'm here.
Thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you so much, Anat. Take care. So I just would love to kind of invite all of you on this call. Many of you I know have been involved in Fall of Freedom, whether you like the name or not. And I'm glad that you're still here. And I personally like the kind of double meaning. And we will be having another activation on October 2nd and 3rd that will be timed precisely to influence people around election time. Um, and I do think, like Vicky points out that, it is kind of an uphill battle at this point. And part of what I want to echo from Anat's talk is about activating the choir and the buck the fuck up piece. And Fall of Freedom was founded and created for exactly those two reasons: to not only activate the choir by building solidarity among us people who are artists and makers and doers, and also to say, buck the fuck up, get off your friggin' device and get out there and do something. And the invitation was to do what you already do, to do the things that you do and make it in the name of freedom. And so that is the invitation. And I hope that that there is some desire to really jump in, both for May Day and for October 2nd and 3rd. Build a new event or register an event that you're already working on. If you are already participating in something for May Day, where you are activating something, whether you're producing a poster or signage for an existing march that's going on, or you are interested in thanks, Michelle, see you later, or you are organizing a poetry reading at your local bookshop in celebration of May Day. Please feel like that is something that you can add the Fall of Freedom banner to, and thereby connect with everyone else who is organizing under the Fall of Freedom banner. Your event will go onto our map. We will highlight events that are happening across the United States. Last round, we had over 700 events in 47 states. We're hoping to expand that group. And Chris has just posted not only the website, but our organizers toolkit, which includes a host of prompts and other ideas for what to organize. There is no event too small or too large to put on the map. So please take a look at what's already posted there. There are about 100 events that are already up, and we're getting many dozens by the day. And also, you can use the digital tools as well. There are a number of logos and different frames for Instagram or other social media that you might be on to tag us, to make us a collaborator. We're delighted if you do any of those things. And of course, most importantly, registering any events that you might be planning. And I guess with that, I will just open it up to any questions that you have about Fall of Freedom, any questions on about Anat's talk that I might be able to answer. And I also want to say one more thing about propaganda, because I know this came up in one of the questions. And one of the things that I'm very interested in is how we build something that a friend of mine, Jonas Stahl, who's an artist who lives in the Netherlands, calls emancipatory propaganda, which is the propaganda that works to build solidarity, connection, and life, as opposed to the kind of propaganda that is all about concentrating wealth and power. What if we could build a propaganda that builds the things that we want in the world, all of the things that we've been talking about during this session, rather than the opposite? And I think in many ways that's what Fall of Freedom aims to do through the many events, is to build those narratives of freedom. So please let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to unmute yourself. We were trying to just be efficient with the questions for Anat because she only had an hour, but I'm happy to have verbal discussions if you want to just raise your hand or just identify yourself and say you have a question. Nirvan, I see you have a question there.
Yeah, hi Laura, thank you. I have, oh, sorry. I have two quick questions. The first one is that the event that I'm doing is a virtual event, and I was wondering, in terms of the way in which that is populated on the map and the way that people can kind of like find out about that or engage in that. Like I wasn't able to actually see, because I typed in the event on the map and I was able to like see it come up, but it didn't like pinpoint to something, obviously, because it's virtual. So what's kind of like the workaround for that?
So when you scroll through, if you just look before you type onto the map, if you just, you know what, let me just share my screen and let me do this. Sorry. And let me make this smaller. Sorry. Why can't I get you to go away? If you go to the events and you go to May Day and you just scroll down.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to do it on my end. One sec.
Yeah, the all of the virtual events are just at the bottom after all of the live events, the
That's okay. I'll just log into.
all of the virtual events are at the bottom there. So that's how
Oh, I see it at the very like. Okay,
yeah,
cool, cool, cool. Because we have all the.
Yeah, if you go past all of the different events,
Got it.
well, we might do, and actually this is a great moment to do this because we're talking about small updates that we can make between now and the end, is to just maybe have a some kind of like it, and then you can also bounce to them if you go here. Oh no, it's not working. Wait, hold on. All right, well, this is something we can work on. Thank you for bringing it to our attention, because this is clearly something we can easily fix. So let me stop sharing. Why don't you let me stop sharing?
Nirvan, I had a question for you. You came to one of our main meetings.
Yeah, great facial recognition.
Well, I was tracking because I wanted to be able to add you into communication. Did someone get in touch with you, and have you been connected since that meeting?
No.
Okay. I have sent you a private message via the chat, and I'll give you further instructions over there. I'll make sure it happens. Okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And we'll take the virtual thing back, because it should be the case that if you clicked on that online virtual tab, that you would go straight down to the drop down to the virtual events. So that will hopefully be fixed soon.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Julie.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, well, first, I wanted to really thank you, because when I saw that you were going to have a knot, I nearly lost my mind, because I feel like nobody in my circles has, or very few people are listening to her. And I have, ever since I read Anand's book, The Persuaders, have been following her and listening to him, interviewing her and stuff. Um, and one of the things that was really helpful to me is just to, as an artist, is to keep remembering uh, a role of painting the beautiful tomorrow, which she didn't really
Mhm.
mention, and that I would like to get out there more. So I guess it's not really a question, but it's something I feel like I've had to fight for, like because it feels, you know, like anything having to do with the things that we're for are all so diminished in our society as, you know, as something that's like Pollyannish or from the 60s and
Or
flower power.
corny, or yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so it's a really hard line to toe. And I mean, that's what, you know, I wasn't, you know, trying to name drop. I guess I was for the marches I've worked on, but it's just been, it's really a struggle to go against the no language. And
Yes.
even to figure out what that is, that will still feel strong, but that is, um, you know,
Well, one thing that I'm gonna just drop in the chat here is a link to the toolkit that Anat has made that is called Freedom Over Fascism Toolkit. And that you know, that is one of the toolkits that they update very regularly and is on the website, that is not on their website, but is very current. So how to talk about war in Iran, how to talk about like, so they continually update this message, this messaging. So you should keep this link and just refresh it because it does give very helpful language to use in these particular situations. And of course, like, you know, I totally get it when people are like, yeah, no, that's not going to work for us. But, you know, there's only so much you can do, right?
right.
But this actually helps with some of that because it gives you really very specific things that you can try. And I would also say that, you know, the rest of Anat's website actually does have toolkits. If you're working on issue specific projects, please go and check it out. It's in multiple languages. It's kind of an incredible resource.
Yeah, I've seen that. I have another website thing for Follow Freedom
Yeah,
website.
please.
Um, so when I go to my event, I there's two ways I can get there. One that I've found is that I can click on the map. I can put in my location of where it's at,
Right.
and then but it has to be I'm in New York, but I have to put in Brooklyn to find my event, or I have to zoom in on the map or scroll way down the list. And I'm pretty sure this is not a quick fix, but there's no way for me to like just link to my event on the website. You know what I mean? Like I have to link to the whole website, and then give specific instructions for how to find the information. Like I'm just trying to design a flyer right now
Yeah,
and
yeah.
where to
Oh, I
point people
see.
to.
Okay. So if
So
you, which is your, just give me, so like
it's a strike picnic in Prospect Park. Uh, installation, I forget the whole, it's got a long
here,
title,
strike
but
picker, here it is. Brooklyn resistors. I see. Okay. So you're asking, like, your question is, how do you send people to this
yeah,
link?
I just want a quick, like the only quick thing is to click on the map and then a window opens, but I can't send them a link to that. You know what I mean? So I have to
Well,
send them to the whole page and say, you can scroll all the way down to find, you know, it's a lot of explaining.
yes, no, I understand that. I think the answer is really that it's you want to where you want to direct people is to this website, to your website, rather than to ours.
Right. I do, always, but you know, I also wanted to like,
To double down on the
yeah, I
follow.
would like to like send them to Follow Freedom website, you know what I mean? So they can see all the
That's
things.
an interesting question and problem. I will take that back to the web people because uh I don't know how we would even think about resolving that. But thank you. I don't have an answer. I'm sorry.
I know it's hard. I've done a lot of organizing, a lot of web
Yeah.
building.
Yeah,
Like it's really hard.
I can pop in and say that this, like Laura talked about in early in the meeting, our website has undergone changes from last year to this year. What we were able to solve for is being able to have logins so that folks can update or change their listings. But as of
Which
yet,
I've done multiple times already, which is great.
yeah, great. All right, fantastic. We love that that's working. As of yet, though, Julie, I don't think that I don't think that each of the listings has a dedicated URL. On the back end, that's not the
Yeah,
way that
that's what I figured.
Yes.
Yeah, the dedicated URL is the one that you put in. So it's unless you want to do like a screenshot and just show people where that it's there.
I'll
I
just
don't
list
know
them
what else
both. I'll
to do.
list the
Yeah.
website and I'll
Yeah.
say search for Brooklyn and then I'll say or you can go to my website. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. Um, cool. Does anyone else have any questions before we sign off? Amazing. Well, listen, thank you everyone for tuning in. We are super excited to have you all part of this like amazing effort. It feels better when we work together and we do it by getting to know one another. And I can't tell you how many incredible people I've met through this effort. So just thank you all for being here. And I look forward to seeing what you come up with for May Day. Please register your events, tell friends to register their events. Tell people to come out, and no matter how big or how small, we can do it. Art matters. Courage is contagious. Thank you, Chris, for everything, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.